You lost how many ships? High Counselor Zixtal's voice cracked with disbelief, their crystalline appendages trembling in a way that scattered prismatic light across the Grand Chamber's obsidian walls. 27 capital ships, your luminescence. Fleet Commander Venra's third eye remained fixed on the polished floor, while their primary pair blinked rapidly in distress. The entire Drake fleet just vanished. The assembled council members erupted in a cacophony of clicks, whistles, and electromagnetic bursts that roughly translated to, "What in the 7 spiral arms of the galaxy happened?" Venra's scales shifted from their usual proud copper to a sickly green as they began their report. "We followed standard first contact protocols when we detected the primitive radio signals from Sol 3. The humans, as they call themselves, had barely achieved lunar travel. Their primary warfare still involved projectile weapons and crude nuclear devices. The Drake fleet was dispatched to conduct a standard shock and awe demonstration, followed by the usual ceremonial surrender and integration into the Galactic Confederation. And Zixtal's crystalline form pulsed with impatient colors. The fleet arrived in-system right on schedule. Initial scans confirmed everything we knew about their technological level. Admiral Drake initiated the standard approach vector toward their largest population centers. Venra paused, mandibles clicking nervously. That's when things got strange. A holographic display materialized in the chamber's center, showing the last transmitted images from the Drake fleet. Earth hung like a blue marble in the void, surrounded by a concerning amount of orbital debris for such a young spacefaring species. "The humans detected our presence almost immediately," Venra continued, "which should have been impossible given their level of technology. But instead of the expected panic, we received this transmission." The chamber filled with a calm human voice speaking in perfect galactic standard. "Greetings, Drake Fleet. We've been expecting you. Please maintain your current position while we process your arrival paperwork. Any unauthorized movement will be considered a hostile action. Thank you for your cooperation." The council chamber erupted again, this time in surprised trills and shocked harmonics. "They spoke Galactic Standard?" one council member demanded. "That's impossible. They shouldn't even know we exist." "It gets worse," Venra admitted. Admiral Drake, following standard procedure for dealing with primitive species showing unexplained capabilities, ordered a display of force. He targeted an uninhabited area of their largest ocean with a Class 2 energy burst. The burst never arrived. The hologram showed the energy weapon's discharge simply vanishing a few thousand kilometers above Earth's surface. Then something even more impossible happened. The planet's entire orbital debris field moved. Every piece of space junk, from defunct satellites to ancient rocket stages, shifted position with precise coordination. By the time we realized those weren't debris but carefully disguised weapons platforms, it was too late. Venra's scales had gone almost white. The humans had surrounded the entire fleet while we were focused on their surface. Their weapons. We've never seen anything like them. They didn't use energy beams or matter projection. They somehow manipulated local space-time itself. The hologram showed the final moments. Space rippling like water around each Drake fleet vessel, reality folding in impossible ways. Then, one by one, the mighty ships of the Confederation simply ceased to exist. No explosions, no debris. They were simply gone. The worst part, Venra continued, their voice barely above a whisper, was the message they sent afterwards. The human voice returned, still eerily calm. "Thank you for participating in our early warning defense system test. Your fleet's performance has been logged and will be used to improve future response protocols. Please note that any subsequent unauthorized incursions into Sol space will be met with escalating levels of force. Have a nice day." The Grand Chamber fell into stunned silence. Finally, High Counselor Zixtal spoke. How is this possible? We've conquered 1,000 worlds. Our technology is the pinnacle of 50,000 years of development. These humans barely mastered atomic fission a century ago. An ancient council member, their crystalline form clouded with age, flickered with amusement. Did anyone actually check when they mastered atomic fission? Or did we just assume based on their public technological profile? Venra's scales shifted again, this time to the deep blue of horrified realization. We based our assessment on their openly broadcast technologies and social media networks. Their entertainment programs still show them struggling with primitive combustion engines and basic spaceflight. Ah, The ancient counselor's form sparkled with what might have been laughter. It seems we've made a rather embarrassing mistake. Did it occur to anyone that a species might deliberately maintain a false technological profile? That they might, perhaps, enjoy watching their entertainment media chronicle their actual history while using it as camouflage for their real capabilities? The implications slowly sank in across the chamber. The humans hadn't just defeated one of the Confederation's most powerful fleets. They had done so casually, almost as an afterthought, using technology so advanced it might as well have been magic. And they had been sitting there the whole time, broadcasting their true history as entertainment, watching the galaxy's civilizations with amusement, while maintaining a carefully crafted image of primitive innocence. What do we do now? Someone finally asked. High Counselor Zixtal's crystalline form dimmed to a thoughtful glow. We do what any sensible civilization does when they discover they've been playing chess while their opponent was playing five-dimensional hyperspace Go. We send diplomats. Very polite diplomats. And we pray to whatever forces created this universe that the humans have a sense of humor about all this. As if in response, a new transmission arrived, displaying on all screens in the chamber. To Galactic Confederation Council. Subject, diplomatic relations. Message, we thought you'd never ask. We've taken the liberty of preparing a proper first contact package, including some fascinating insights about your own species that you might have missed in your evolutionary history. Looking forward to establishing formal relations. P.S. We're particularly interested in discussing that delightful little colony you're planning in the Carina Sagittarius arm. You know, the one you thought nobody knew about. We should talk about that. The council chamber erupted into chaos once more. But beneath the panic and confusion, there was a new emotion beginning to emerge. Relief. Because if there's one thing worse than discovering you're not the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, it's discovering that the civilization that is more advanced has been watching you fumble around for centuries and still wants to be friends. Though some council members would later swear they heard human laughter echoing through subspace, soft and amused, like parents watching their children finally figure out a particularly clever puzzle. Somewhere on Earth, in a monitoring station disguised as an abandoned coffee shop, two humans sat watching the council's reaction on their quantum displays. Think we scared them too much? Sarah Chen, Director of Extraterrestrial Relations, asked while sipping her very real, very excellent coffee. Her colleague, Dr. James Okonjo, Chief of First Contact Psychology, shrugged. Nah. Sometimes the best way to start a friendship is to get the whole, we could have conquered you but chose not to thing out of the way early. Prevents misunderstandings later. True, Sarah grinned. Sarah. Besides, did you see their faces when they realized all our sci-fi shows were actually historical documentaries? That was pretty priceless, James agreed. Though I still say we should have kept the Stargate network secret a little longer. You know, for dramatic effect. James, what have I told you about being melodramatic with the aliens? That it's unprofessional and could cause diplomatic incidents, he recited dutifully, then grinned. But you have to admit, their expressions when they realize we've been watching their favorite entertainment broadcasts and adding laugh tracks? Sarah snorted into her coffee. Okay, yeah, that's going to be pretty good. Speaking of which, new episode of Humans Are Weird is trending on the Confederation Entertainment Networks. Apparently, we're up to 700 billion viewers. See? And they say humans don't know how to make first contact interesting. James checked his quantum display. Oh, looks like they're finally sending that diplomatic mission. Should we tell them we've already prepared their quarters? With environmental controls exactly matched to their homeworld? Nah, Sarah grinned. Let's let them think they're surprising us. It's only polite. After all, humanity had learned long ago that sometimes the best way to welcome someone into the galactic community was to let them maintain their dignified illusions. Even if those illusions involved thinking they were the ones making first contact, rather than finally noticing the invitation that had been waiting for them all along. In the depths of human space, 27 Drake fleet ships sat peacefully in a quantum pocket dimension, their crews enjoying surprisingly comfortable accommodation and an extensive entertainment package, waiting for the diplomatic situation to sort itself out. They had already voted unanimously to request asylum, especially after discovering that human food was significantly better than standard Confederation rations. But that's another story entirely. 3 standard galactic weeks later, the Confederation's diplomatic vessel, Voice of Peaceful Intent, approached Earth's orbit, with all the caution of a prey species entering a predator's den. The ship's name had been hastily changed from its previous designation, Imperial Might, a modification that hadn't gone unnoticed by Earth's monitoring systems. Ambassador Kalara, a seasoned diplomat from the aquatic species of Nox Prime, stood on the bridge watching Earth grow larger in their viewing screens. Their bioluminescent patterns shifted in complex patterns of anxiety and anticipation. Interesting choice, Sarah Chen mused, watching the approaching vessel from her office in the Lunar Diplomatic Center. Sending an aquatic species ambassador. They're trying to appear as non-threatening as possible. Also testing our environmental manipulation capabilities, James added, now sporting a newly grown beard that he insisted made him look more diplomatically imposing. The Nox require very specific conditions to survive. They're checking if we can actually accommodate diverse species, as well as we claimed. Sarah rolled her eyes. They do realize we can see through their hull materials and have already noted all 14 different species they're trying to hide in their cultural observation sections. Let them have their little secrets, James grinned. Besides, their attempts at espionage are adorable. Did you see the quantum scanner they think they've cleverly disguised as a food synthesizer? The one that's actually a repurposed coffee maker from their ship's galley? Yes, I noticed. Sarah checked her displays. Speaking of which, how are our guests from the Drake fleet doing? Surprisingly well. They've started a cultural exchange program with the Mars colony. Apparently they're fascinated by human music. Admiral Drake himself has become quite the jazz enthusiast. The voice of peaceful intent had finally reached its designated orbital position, and right on cue, a transmission arrived. Earth Control, this is Ambassador Kalara of the Galactic Confederation requesting permission to approach and establish diplomatic relations. Sarah straightened her uniform, a subtle blend of Earth formal wear and elements borrowed from various galactic cultures, and tapped her response key. Ambassador Kalara, this is Director Chen of Earth's Extraterrestrial Relations Department. Permission granted. Please follow the quantum beacon to Docking Base 7 of the Lunar Diplomatic Center. And yes, we've already adjusted the environmental controls in your quarters to Nox Prime specifications. The coral gardens are particularly lovely this time of year. There was a long pause before Kalara responded, their voice carrying a mix of resignation and amazement. Thank you, Director Chen. Though I don't recall mentioning my species' environmental requirements. Oh, we've had quite a while to study Confederation species, Sarah replied cheerfully. We particularly enjoyed your people's underwater ballet performances in the Hexagon Nebula last spring. The neural harmonics were absolutely stunning. Another pause. Those performances were conducted in a supposedly isolated deep space cultural preserve. Were they? How interesting. We should discuss cultural exchange programs over dinner. We've prepared both traditional Nox cuisine and some Earth specialties we think you might enjoy. Oh, and please let your cultural observation team know that they're welcome to join us. We've prepared accommodations for all 14 species. The silence from the Confederation ship was profound. James leaned back in his chair, grinning. You're enjoying this way too much. Can you blame me? After centuries of watching them bumble around the galaxy, it's nice to finally have an honest conversation. Sarah checked her quantum display again. Though I do feel a bit bad about the whole "we've been watching you for centuries" reveal. It's got to be somewhat unsettling. Better than letting them continue thinking they're the height of galactic civilization, James pointed out. Besides, did you see the latest analysis from Sociological? Apparently the Drake Fleet incident has sparked a massive renaissance in Confederation society. Nothing motivates technological advancement quite like discovering you're not at the top of the food chain. Speaking of the food chain, Sarah pulled up another display, this one showing a massive structure hidden in subspace near the galactic core. Our friends from the Andromeda Galaxy are asking when we plan to introduce the Confederation to the larger galactic community. One existential revelation at a time, James advised. Let's get them past the humans our secretly advanced shock before we hit them with, oh, by the way, there's an entire multi-galaxy civilization out there, and Earth is just one of its newer members. Sarah nodded, then brightened as new data scrolled across her display. Oh, this is interesting. Remember that colony they were planning in the Carina Sagittarius arm? Turns out they were trying to establish a foothold near what they thought was a dormant hyperspace nexus. The one that's actually an ancient garbage disposal unit? That's the one. Should we tell them? Maybe after dinner. No need to ruin their appetite. James stood, straightening his own uniform. Shall we go welcome our guests? I hear Ambassador Kalara has quite the reputation for diplomatic poetry. Just don't mention that we've already translated their entire historical archive. including the embarrassing adolescent poems they thought they'd encrypted. As they headed toward the diplomatic reception area, Sarah couldn't help but smile. First contact was always interesting, but there was something special about welcoming a civilization that had arrived thinking they were the teachers, only to discover they were about to become students. In the quantum pocket dimension, Admiral Drake was introducing his crew to the concept of jazz improvisation, their scaled appendages proving surprisingly adept at trumpet playing. They had already started planning a concert tour for when diplomatic relations were properly established. And somewhere in the vast network of human space, ancient quantum processors continued their work, monitoring the galaxy's civilizations as they had for millennia, waiting for each new species to look up at the stars and finally ask the right questions. The diplomatic dance was just beginning, and humanity was, as always, leading the way, even if their partners didn't quite know all the steps yet. The Lunar Diplomatic Center's Grand Reception Hall lived up to its name, though not in ways the Confederation delegation had expected. Instead of the ostentatious display of technological might they'd anticipated, they found themselves in what appeared to be a perfect reproduction of Earth's various natural environments seamlessly blended together in impossible ways. Ambassador Kalara swam through a portion of warm ocean that somehow existed alongside a pristine rainforest, while their reptilian colleagues basked in patches of desert sun that cast no shadows on the nearby Arctic tundra, where the frost mines of Centauri Beta made themselves at home. "Impressive environmental manipulation," Kalara commented, their bioluminescence patterns expressing complicated emotions. "Though I suspect this is barely scratching the surface of your capabilities." Sarah Chen, standing on what appeared to be solid water at the ocean's edge, smiled diplomatically. "We find that comfortable guests make for better conversations. Though I must admit, maintaining separate gravitational orientations for 23 different species in the same space is an interesting exercise in local physics manipulation." The entire delegation froze. 23? Kalara's patterns flickered in alarm. "But we only brought 14 species." "Oh, did we not mention the other observers?" Sarah gestured to seemingly empty spaces around the hall. "You might as well drop your cloaking fields, friends. The quantum fluctuations are giving me a headache." One by one, representatives from 9 additional species shimmed into visibility, their stealth technologies, previously thought undetectable, apparently having been obvious to their hosts all along. "The Shade Collective sends its regards," one of the newly revealed beings said, its form shifting between states of matter. "We apologize for the subterfuge, but we were curious about human capabilities." "The Axiom minds concur," said another, its crystalline form similar to but far more advanced than the Confederation Council members, though we now suspect we may have underestimated them somewhat. James, who had been quietly enjoying the scene, finally spoke up. "You know, there's a human saying, when you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. Though in this case, perhaps, when you find yourself outmatched, stop trying to spy would be more appropriate." Kalara's patterns shifted to what humans had learned to recognize as embarrassed resignation. "I don't suppose there's any point in maintaining our technological reservations?" "You mean the quantum core you've got hidden in your environmental suit? Or the tachyon communicator disguised as a ceremonial bracelet?" Sarah's smile remained friendly. "They're lovely devices, by the way. The miniaturization on that quantum core is particularly elegant, even if it's a few centuries behind current standards." The revelation that their most advanced technologies were considered outdated hit the delegation hard. A frost mind spoke up, its thoughts creating crystalline patterns in the air. How long have humans really been watching us?" "Oh, about as long as we've been watching everyone else," James said casually. "Did you know there are currently 78 civilizations in this galaxy that haven't achieved spaceflight yet? We've got betting pools on which ones will figure out quantum mechanics first. The octopoid species in the Carina arm are currently favored." "Currently favored by whom?" The question came from one of the previously hidden observers, its energy form pulsing with curiosity. Sarah and James exchanged glances. "Perhaps," Sarah said carefully, "it's time we introduced you to some friends." The Grand Hall's reality shifted, expanding to reveal what had always been there but hidden from conventional spacetime. The delegates found themselves standing in a vast chamber that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions, filled with representatives from civilizations they had never imagined existed. "Welcome," Sarah said, "to the actual galactic community, or as we like to call it, Sentience Anonymous." The chamber erupted in what could only be described as multidimensional chuckling. "You mean—" Kalara's patterns were practically strobing now. "Earth isn't just more advanced than the Confederation. You're part of a larger civilization that spans multiple galaxies? James finished. Yes, though technically, Earth's jurisdiction only covers about 3% of the Virgo supercluster. We're still relatively new members. The Confederation delegates, both official and hidden, tried to process this information while watching beings of pure energy casually chat with what appeared to be sentient mathematical concepts about the latest developments in transdimensional entertainment. The donation of the Drake fleet makes more sense now, one of the hidden observers noted. You weren't just showing off. You were following standard protocols for preserving specimens of developing civilizations. We prefer cultural exchange participants, Sarah corrected. And Admiral Drake's jazz quintet is really coming along nicely. Though we had to ban them from practicing near any planetary bodies after that incident with Neptune's rings. Speaking of entertainment, James added, your civilization's development has been quite popular with the broader community. The episode where you discovered quantum entanglement, but used it to improve your entertainment streaming services before applying it to space travel, got particular praise for its comedic timing. Our civilization's development has been entertainment? Oh, yes. A being of pure light chimed in. The show Growing Up Galactic the Confederation Story is one of our highest-rated programs. The season where you nearly discovered the true nature of dark matter but got distracted by developing better food replicators was particularly engaging. Kalara's patterns had settled into what humans recognized as stunned acceptance. I don't suppose, that is, are we at least doing well, as a civilization? Sarah's expression softened. Actually, you're doing remarkably well. Most civilizations that achieve your level of technology without destroying themselves show similar patterns of development. The focus on entertainment and quality of life over pure military might? That's usually a good sign. It's why we decided it was time for proper contact. Though, James added with a grin, we did have to intervene when your automated mining fleets nearly disturbed that sleeping cosmic entity in the Carina Sagittarius arm. The what and the where? The one you thought was a dormant hyperspace nexus? Ancient cosmic entity. Likes to nap for a few million years at a time. Gets rather grumpy if awakened prematurely. We had to redirect your mining ships while making it look like equipment malfunctions. A being that appeared to be a living quantum probability field rippled with amusement. Remember that time they almost discovered the subethereal community living in their star system's magnetic fields? The way humans managed to distract them with that invented crisis about solar flare predictions was masterful. We do try, Sarah said modestly, though perhaps we should focus on the future rather than the past. Now that formal contact has been established, there's the question of how to integrate the Confederation into the broader community. And, James added, what to do about those other civilizations that have been watching the Confederation, thinking they were being stealthy. He glanced meaningfully at several apparently empty sections of space, which quickly filled with sheepish-looking representatives from even more hidden delegations. Kalara, whose patterns had finally settled into something approaching calm, spoke for the group. I believe I speak for all of us when I say, we have many questions. Excellent! Sarah beamed. Questions are always a good start. Though perhaps we should begin with something simple, like the true nature of space-time, before we get into the really complicated stuff. Like why that Earth entertainment program Reality TV is actually a documentary about parallel universe manipulation. The assembled delegates, representing civilizations that had thought themselves the height of advancement mere hours ago, settled in for what promised to be a very interesting briefing. In the background, the quantum probability field being started taking bets on how long it would take them to realize that humans had also mastered time travel and had technically been managing their civilization's development since before their sons were born. But that, as they say in all civilizations advanced enough to appreciate narrative structure, is a story for another time. The Grand Assembly of Universal Species convened in what appeared to be, from certain angles and dimensional perspectives, an infinitely vast amphitheater constructed from crystallized time. Representatives from civilizations spanning multiple galaxies gathered to discuss recent developments, though gathered was perhaps an imprecise term when many participants existed as quantum probability fields or pure mathematical concepts. Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's representative to the Assembly, sat in a chair that simultaneously occupied several quantum states while reviewing her presentation materials. The topic at hand: the successful integration of the Confederation into the broader universal community and its implications for future diplomatic protocols. As you can see from these temporal matrices, Sarah addressed the assembly, her voice automatically translating into several million different forms of communication simultaneously. The Confederation's adaptation rate has exceeded our initial projections by approximately 37%. A being composed entirely of symphonic mathematics chimed in with a query that translated roughly as, "Have you identified the primary catalysts for this accelerated integration?" "Several factors appear significant," Sarah responded, gesturing to a holographic display that showed information in 17 spatial dimensions. "The Drake fleet's enthusiastic participation in cultural exchange programs has been particularly influential. Their jazz performances have become quite popular, especially in the Andromeda Entertainment District." "Indeed," resonated a collective consciousness from the Triangulum Galaxy. "Their interpretation of giant steps using quantum harmonics was most impressive, even if it did temporarily alter the fundamental frequency of several nearby star systems." James Okonjo, who had been monitoring the proceedings while simultaneously existing across several parallel timelines, added his observations. "The Confederation's scientific community has shown remarkable adaptability. Once they overcame their initial shock, their enthusiasm for learning has been extraordinary." A ripple of amused agreement passed through the assembly. Several energy beings flickered in what might have been laughter as they recalled the Confederation scientists' reactions to learning that their most advanced theoretical physics papers had been used as children's bedtime stories in some of the more evolved civilizations. "There is, however, a matter of some concern," Sarah continued, her expression becoming more serious. "Our monitoring systems have detected an unusual pattern of quantum consciousness emergence across multiple developing civilizations in the local galactic cluster." The assembly's attention focused more intensely, causing several reality matrices to temporarily merge. "The pattern suggests," Sarah explained, "that the Confederation's integration has created a cascading effect in the quantum consciousness substrate. Multiple civilizations are achieving enlightenment significantly ahead of projected timeframes." "Fascinating," commented a being that existed primarily as a set of elegant mathematical proofs. "The implications for the universal consciousness integration timeline are significant." Kalara, who had been invited to attend as a representative of newly integrated civilizations, watched the proceedings with a mixture of awe and growing comprehension. Their patterns shifted in what humans had learned to recognize as sudden insight. "The entertainment broadcasts," they said, their patterns intensifying. "When we thought we were creating fictional content about advanced concepts, we were actually accessing the quantum consciousness substrate and broadcasting genuine advanced theories disguised as entertainment." "Precisely," James confirmed. "Your civilization's particular gift for translating complex universal truths into compelling narratives has had interesting effects on developing species." A wave of what might have been concern passed through the assembly. A representative from the Department of Universal Development spoke up, their form a shifting cascade of probability functions. "This could necessitate adjustments to our standard protocols for civilization management." "Perhaps," Sarah suggested. "This is not a problem to be solved, but an opportunity to be explored. The Confederation's unique approach to processing and transmitting complex information through entertainment might represent an evolutionary advancement in universal consciousness propagation." The assembly buzzed with discussion, causing several temporary quantum singularities to form and dissipate. The concept was unprecedented. A civilization inadvertently accelerating universal development through what they thought was merely creative entertainment. "There's more," James added, bringing up a new set of temporal projections. "Analysis suggests that this acceleration effect isn't limited to developing civilizations. Several established universal societies have reported increased rates of quantum consciousness evolution after exposure to Confederation entertainment broadcasts." Kalara's patterns expressed what might have been embarrassment. "Are you suggesting that our terrible science fiction shows are somehow advancing the development of the entire universe?" "Not advancing," corrected a being composed of pure theoretical physics. "Catalyzing. Your civilization's unique ability to translate quantum truths into narrative forms appears to resonate with the fundamental storytelling structure of reality itself." Sarah nodded. "Which brings us to our proposal. Instead of attempting to suppress this effect, we suggest establishing a new department, the Bureau of Narrative Physics and Universal Development." The assembly stirred with interest. The idea of officially incorporating storytelling into the fundamental management of universal development was unprecedented. Yet the data supporting its effectiveness was undeniable. "And," James added with a slight smile, We propose that the Confederation take a leading role in this new department, given their demonstrated expertise in the field. Kalara's patterns shifted through several states of shock before settling into something approaching delighted disbelief. You want us to continue making our science fiction shows, but officially, as part of universal development? With some guidance and oversight, of course, Sarah clarified. But essentially, yes. Your civilization's knack for accidentally encoding quantum truths in entertaining narratives could be revolutionary for universal consciousness development. The assembly erupted in a cascade of quantum possibilities as members debated the implications. Several higher-dimensional beings began running simulations of potential outcomes, while others started analyzing the metaphysical implications of institutionalizing narrative physics as a fundamental force of universal development. Meanwhile, in a quantum pocket dimension that had been temporarily converted into a recording studio, Admiral Drake and his jazz ensemble were unknowingly contributing to the discussion. Their latest performance, a fusion of traditional Earth jazz with quantum harmonics and multi-dimensional rhythm structures, was inadvertently creating ripples in the universal consciousness substrate that would influence developing civilizations for millennia to come. As the assembly debated, Sarah exchanged knowing looks with James. They had suspected, ever since first discovering human entertainment broadcasts being used as advanced physics textbooks in distant galaxies, that narrative might be more fundamental to the structure of reality than anyone had realized. The universe, it seemed, had a taste for good storytelling, and the Confederation, in their earnest attempts to create entertaining science fiction, had accidentally tapped into one of its most fundamental forces. But that revelation, like all good plot twists, would need proper setup and development before it could be fully appreciated. In the weeks following the initial revelation, the Confederation delegates found themselves experiencing what humans called perspective whiplash. The universe, it seemed, was both vastly more complex and significantly more organized than they had imagined. The hardest part to accept, Ambassador Kalara confided to Sarah during one of their now regular quantum tea sessions, isn't that we're not the most advanced civilization. It's that the universe is so administered. They were sitting in what appeared to be a traditional English garden, though the tea service floated in mid-air and occasionally phased through multiple dimensions. Kalara had developed a particular fondness for Earl Grey, especially when served in cups that existed in 4 spatial dimensions. Administered is such a harsh word, Sarah replied, adding a drop of milk to her tea through a localized time reversal. We prefer to think of it as collaborative universal maintenance. Is that why there's a department for managing vacuum decay? The Department of Quantum Stability and Universal Persistence? Oh yes. Though these days they spend more time organizing multidimensional office parties than preventing the collapse of reality. The universe has been quite stable since we implemented those patches to the fundamental forces back in... well, time becomes rather meaningless when you're working on that scale. Kalara's patterns shifted to what Sarah had learned to recognize as philosophical curiosity. That's another thing that bothers many of us. You speak of manipulating fundamental forces as casually as we might discuss changing environmental settings. Perspective is everything, James commented, appearing suddenly in a chair that had always been there, but also hadn't existed a moment ago. To some of the higher dimensional beings we work with, manipulating space-time is about as complex as you find operating a food synthesizer. A gentle chime interrupted their conversation, a courtesy alert that reality was about to shift. The garden smoothly transformed into a vast observation chamber, offering a view of the Confederation Council chamber where an emergency session was in progress. High Counselor Zixtal was attempting to maintain order as various representatives argued about how to proceed with their newfound understanding of their place in the universe. The crystalline being's form flickered with stress patterns. Should we tell them about the simulation? James mused, watching the chaos unfold. Which one? Sarah asked. The one they're running to model galactic politics, or the one they're inside of? Neither is precisely accurate, a new voice joined in. One of the quantum probability beings, who had taken to attending these sessions out of what they claimed was anthropological interest. Though I suppose it depends on how you define simulation when dealing with recursive reality matrices. Kalara's patterns expressed what might have been a headache. Sometimes I think you reveal these things just to watch our reactions. Not at all, Sarah assured them, though her smile held a hint of mischief. We're actually being quite gentle with the revelations. Remember, most of us had to process all of this at once when we made first contact with the broader community. Speaking of processing, James interjected, How are the Drake Fleet's asylum applications coming along? Approved this morning, Sarah confirmed, though Admiral Drake has requested a temporary delay in their formal integration. Something about wanting to perfect their jazz performance before their debut in the Andromeda Galaxy's entertainment district. The observation chamber's view shifted to show the Drake Fleet's temporary quantum residence, where what appeared to be a full orchestra had assembled. The sight of former invasion fleet commanders earnestly practicing Earth musical instruments, while discussing theories of harmonic resonance with beings of pure energy was surprisingly heartwarming. You know, Kalara said thoughtfully, when we sent that fleet, we thought we were following standard protocols for dealing with primitive species. Instead, we accidentally volunteered for the galaxy's most advanced cultural exchange program. There are no accidents. The quantum probability being stated, its form rippling with what might have been amusement, though there are occasionally highly improbable events that we arrange for entertainment value. Speaking of entertainment, James added, wait until they discover that Earth's apparent technological development was actually orchestrated backward through time. We started with the advanced stuff, and had to deliberately figure out how to make more primitive technology work. Sarah shot him a look. I thought we were saving that revelation for next week's orientation session. Oh, right. Sorry, temporal spoilers. Kalara's patterns had shifted to a new configuration, one that the human systems took a moment to recognize as resigned amusement. You know, a few months ago I would have found all of this overwhelming. Now I'm just curious about what impossible thing we'll learn next. That's the spirit, Sarah beamed, though perhaps we should wait a bit before introducing you to the civilizations that exist entirely as mathematical concepts. They can be a bit intense for newcomers. The quantum probability being rippled again. Remember when they tried to explain four-dimensional economic theory to that group from the Sagittarius arm? 3 entire species had to take a sabbatical to recover from the conceptual shock. To be fair, James pointed out, that was partly because they insisted on conducting the lecture while demonstrating practical applications in real time. The local stock markets still haven't quite recovered from suddenly operating on non-linear temporal axes. Their conversation was interrupted by a priority alert from the Lunar Diplomatic Center's main monitoring system. Sarah's expression shifted to one of professional interest as she reviewed the data. Well, she announced, it appears we have another first contact situation developing. A civilization in the Carina Arm has just achieved quantum consciousness synchronization across their entire species. Already? James checked his own data feed. The models predicted that wouldn't happen for another century. Apparently, they got inspired by some leaked entertainment broadcasts from the Confederation. Something about a science fiction show that accidentally described actual quantum consciousness theory? Kalara's patterns expressed what might have been embarrassment. That may have been one of our more popular programs, though we thought we were making it all up. Fascinating how often fiction precedes reality, the quantum probability being observed. Or perhaps not, given the recursive nature of information flow through the quantum consciousness substrate that underlies universal sentience. Let's save the metaphysical discussions for after we deal with the new arrival, Sarah suggested diplomatically. Kalara, would you and the Confederation delegation like to observe how we handle these situations? It might help provide context for your own recent experience. You mean watch how you pretend to be surprised by civilizations you've been monitoring since before their stars formed? Kalara's patterns showed distinct amusement. That does sound educational. As they prepared to welcome yet another civilization into the broader universal community, Sarah couldn't help but smile. The galaxy was growing more interesting by the day, and humanity's role as universal tour guide was proving to be one of their more entertaining responsibilities. Though they still hadn't told the Confederation about the physical comedy show, their early attempts at faster-than-light travel had inspired among the higher-dimensional beings. Some revelations, they had learned, were best saved for when you really needed to lighten the mood during particularly heavy philosophical discussions. But that, like so many things in this vast and surprisingly well-organized universe, was a story still in development. To be continued.